The snowstorm wasn't supposed to be deadly. It was just another freezing winter evening in northern Montana, the kind that covered roads in white silence and convinced everyone to stay indoors. But one desperate phone call changed everything. When I reached the small farmhouse at the edge of town, I found a woman wrapped in blankets, shivering beside a cold fireplace, trying to smile through fear. I thought I was only there to fix a broken heater. I had no idea I was about to repair something far more broken than a furnace. If you believe kindness and second chances can change someone's life, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that stay with your heart. My name is Nathan, and I had spent nearly 15 years repairing heating systems across Montana. Most customers remembered me for fixing their homes before the cold became unbearable. Few knew that after losing my wife in a car accident 3 years earlier, fixing heaters had become my way of avoiding the silence waiting for me at home. Every repaired furnace meant another family stayed warm, while I returned to an empty house where no one was waiting. That evening, the dispatcher almost canceled the emergency call because of the storm. The roads were dangerous, visibility was poor, and most repair companies had already closed for the night. But something about the trembling voice on the phone stayed with me. The woman had simply said that her heater had stopped working and that her elderly father had passed away only weeks before, leaving her alone in the farmhouse. She didn't complain. She didn't beg. She only whispered that she didn't know how much longer she could stay warm. The drive took nearly 2 hours. Snow buried the roads, and icy winds pushed against my truck like invisible hands trying to turn me around. By the time I reached the property, darkness had swallowed everything except one dim porch light, struggling through the storm. The woman who opened the door introduced herself as Grace. She looked exhausted. Her cheeks were pale from the cold, and she wore 2 oversized sweaters beneath an old winter coat. Inside, the house felt colder than the world outside. Frost had begun forming along the inside edges of the windows. I immediately went downstairs to inspect the furnace. Years of experience told me it wasn't a simple repair. A cracked ignition module had burned out completely, and the replacement wasn't something I carried in my truck. Under normal circumstances, I would have ordered the part and returned the next day. But there was nothing normal about that night. Temperatures were expected to fall below 0 before midnight. I searched through every toolbox, every spare component, and every forgotten storage compartment until I found an older ignition assembly from another manufacturer. It wasn't designed for that exact furnace, but with careful adjustments. And several hours of work, I managed to make it fit safely. As I worked, Grace quietly brought me coffee that had already gone cold within minutes. She apologized over and over for calling so late. But I could tell she wasn't apologizing for the heater. She was apologizing for needing someone at all. Around midnight, the furnace finally roared back to life. Warm air slowly filled the basement before rising through the vents into every room of the old farmhouse. The silence disappeared, replaced by the comforting hum of heat, returning to a home that had almost surrendered to winter. Grace stood beside one of the vents, letting warm air brush against her hands. Tears rolled down her face before she even realized she was crying. She admitted that after losing her father, every room had felt empty. The broken heater had convinced her the house itself had given up. She had seriously considered selling the farm and leaving everything behind, because living there alone had become too painful. I packed my tools and prepared to leave, knowing the roads would only become worse before morning. That's when she softly reached for my sleeve. She looked at me with tired eyes that carried weeks of grief no one had noticed. Then she whispered the words, "I will never forget. Stay. The house is warmer when you're in it." She wasn't talking about the heater. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I understood that kind of loneliness because I carried it every single day. It wasn't romance that filled the room. It was recognition. 2 strangers had spent years surviving instead of living. I stayed. We talked until sunrise. She told me stories about growing up on the farm, helping her father during harsh winters, and dreaming of opening a small bakery that never happened, because life always demanded something else first. I told her about my wife, the accident, and how work had become the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Neither of us tried to fix the other's pain. We simply listened. Over the following months, I found reasons to visit the farmhouse again. Sometimes I checked the heating system, even when it didn't need maintenance. Sometimes I helped repair fences buried under snow. Other times we simply shared coffee on the porch while watching the seasons slowly change. Spring finally arrived. The snow melted. The fields turned green again. Grace eventually opened a tiny bakery in the nearest town, using recipes her father had written by hand decades earlier. I became her first customer every morning before work. People often assumed our story began because I repaired her furnace. They were wrong. It began because neither of us walked away when the other needed someone to stay. Years later, whenever winter returned and snow covered the farmhouse once again, the heater continued running perfectly. But every time I heard it humming through the house, I remembered that freezing night and realized something simple. Sometimes warmth doesn't come from fire. Sometimes it comes from another human being refusing to leave. If this story touched your heart, please write in the comments. Kindness keeps hearts warm. We'd love to read every message. And if this story reminded you that even the coldest seasons can lead to new beginnings, please like this video, share it with someone who may need hope today, subscribe to the channel, and leave a heartfelt comment. Your support helps these stories reach people who need a little warmth in their lives. Because sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't fixing a broken heater. Sometimes it's discovering that two broken hearts can slowly learn to feel at home again.